Ukraine will not be joining NATO this year, and perhaps not for a very long time. And if you think the reason lies solely in defensive strategy, you're missing a shocking truth hidden behind closed doors in Brussels and Washington. Why would a country under invasion, steadily aligning itself with Western standards, still be kept at arm's length? Because NATO is not just a military alliance, it's a geopolitical chessboard where every piece has a price. You need to understand this. If Ukraine joins NATO during an active war, it means the entire alliance is immediately at war with Russia. This wouldn't be just a regional conflict anymore. It would mark the beginning of a world war. But do you really believe European nations, already struggling with inflation, energy crises, and internal political chaos, are willing to trade their peace for Kiev's defense? Beneath the polished statements of unity lies a cold, calculated fear. Fear of dragging all of Europe into full-scale war. Fear of provoking the world's largest nuclear arsenal. And fear of shattering the fragile balance between deterrence and escalation. To uncover the hidden truth, you have to look at the deals behind the scenes, the phone calls between presidents and prime ministers, the classified NATO council meetings, and the unpublished memorandums, all circling around one goal: keep Ukraine strong enough not to collapse, but never strong enough to pull NATO into war. This isn't abandonment, this is damage control. An active war Ukraine inside NATO would immediately trigger Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause. And who sends troops first? The US? Germany? France? Do you think they're ready to risk thousands of lives for a nation they still argue over how much aid to send? Yes, they provide weapons, but only within tightly calculated limits. Every missile sent is a compromise. Every delay is a signal. And don't forget the role of the US, the power center of NATO. Isn't it strange that every time Ukraine gets hopeful, Washington hits the brakes? Because to America, NATO is not a rescue network. It's a tool for preserving global influence. If Ukraine is admitted too soon, the US loses its leverage over Russia, over China, even over Europe itself. With every delay, Ukraine becomes more dependent on Western aid, more bound to Western command, more tightly controlled under the guise of support. This isn't pure alliance, it's strategic dependency. And if you're only looking at NATO's blue and white flag as a symbol of hope, you're missing the larger board it represents. Finally, there's one deeply buried reason few dare to say aloud: fear that a fast-tracked Ukraine would trigger a domino effect. Former Soviet countries like Georgia, Moldova, even Belarus, if unrest erupts, could immediately push for the same path. A buffer zone that Russia bled and threatened for decades would collapse in days. And when that happens, the world would enter a new order, one nobody can fully control. Can you imagine the scenario if 5 nations on Russia's doorstep suddenly became NATO members? Remember, the Cold War never ended. It just changed form. And NATO has no intention of lighting the fuse that could set off its final explosion. At least, not yet. So, if you're waiting for the day Ukraine steps through NATO's doors and everything suddenly becomes safe, ask yourself this: is that truly a promise or just a beautifully wrapped delay tactic? Because in international politics, there are no eternal friends, only permanent interests. And right now, NATO's greatest interest is keeping Ukraine on the edge.